Welcome back to Boring Build Friday. We're once again working on our 2018 Ram Promaster City. Now the last time we got the engine in it and we got it running. Now it's time to fix all the body damage that the tow truck driver left for us. Let's get started. So we have a really nice rack here. I'm going to have to take it out because I need to be able to get in there to replace the inner wheelhouse. So I will sell this rack on my website. So if you want it, it fits any 2015 to 2020 Ram Promaster City. Let's get it out of here. So this rack is like an enormous erector set. It's held together with a lot of little nuts and bolts. So we'll pull this bracket out of the top. We'll unbolt the other side. This just holds it into the van. Then we open the bottom drawer all the way up. We can take the cargo hooks. These are the factory cargo hooks off the floor. That's what holds the bottom of the rack to the truck. Once we get all four of these off, our rack does move around a little bit, but it's still not going to fit through the door opening. So I'll start by taking these brackets off. You'll have to forgive me if this isn't the right way to do this. I'm kind of making it up as I go along. So we'll get those brackets out of the way, make it a little bit shorter, maybe it'll fit through the door. At least they were nice enough to use all the same size nuts and bolts everywhere. Unlike Fiat when they built this van, they used every single size and type of fastener ever created. I think they even made up some new ones, because who needs efficiency? Well, it didn't fit through the door. Actually, it would have, but it's a little bit heavy and awkward, and I'm by myself. Should have ordered a pizza to get the pizza girl over here to help. So now we'll take the top supports off of the uprights. And we'll lower one of the drawers down. We'll actually just loosen it up and it falls down. Now I realize that my arms are too short to lift this thing all the way up. With two people, you could just slide it straight up to the top, be no problem. But since I'm only one person, we're going to lift it up, tighten it up, go to the other side, do the same thing, only a little bit higher. Go back to the other side, loosen up the bolts, slide it up a little higher, tighten them back up. We're just going to do this all the way until we get to the top. It's a slow process, but it's the only way I could come up with right now. It's pretty wobbly once you take all the supports out of it. Almost to the top. Alright, now we can go all the way off the top. So we don't have to tighten it back up, we'll just set it up on top. It's pretty sketchy. It's Promaster rack Jenga. So now it's out of there, it's just sitting on the top. So we'll slide it down. Of course, one has to get stuck back in there. We'll use our Promaster rack disassembly tool to take that apart. And now we can slide this shelf out of here. They are a little heavy. They're very awkward because they're so big. So that process took me a little too long. So I'm going to try a different way. Lift the middle rack up a little bit. Now we're going to lift the lower rack. This one I can't get the impact on, so I got to use a wrench. So we'll loosen up the lower rack and it drops down a little bit. Then we're going to lift it up. It's not cooperating. So now we're going to tighten it back up once we gave ourselves a little space. My thinking here is I'm just going to remove the uprights. Instead of trying to move the rack up the uprights, I'm just going to move the uprights up the shelves. So I'm going to slide it out a little bit so I can get to the bolts. One, bolt the uprights from the base plates. I'll lift the back of the lower shelf up. I guess it'd be the front. It's the front of the van. That's the back from here. So we'll tighten the shelf up a little higher so we can get to those base plate bolts that hold the uprights in. Once we have those loose, we can drop the shelf back down. We'll drop the middle shelf down. Now we can start removing our uprights. The plan worked. This side wasn't as easy. I couldn't lift the uprights up because there's that pesky roof in the way. So our shelves are free. Put this one out of the way. And we'll lift the bottom one out of the way. This one is a little bit heavier than the other two. Doesn't help that I was too lazy to take all the junk out of it. So I'll slide the base out from under it and kind of twist the drawer, slide it out the back. And all the parts that I should have taken out fell out. These are just the dividers for the drawer. They move around, so you can configure them in any way you want. And so that when you lift the drawer up, they all fall out. Alright, now that that's out of the way, we can get to work. So that was way more involved than I was hoping for. I was hoping I could just unbolt it, take the brackets off the top, turn it sideways, and slide it out. It's a very tight fit, so I had to take it all apart. Now you can see just how bad our wheelhouse is. So we have some very aggressive inspection ports. I could patch all those holes, but this does show. So to me, it's better just to change this whole wheelhouse. I'm going to pop this little cover off the back. Disconnect the wiring harness inside so we don't melt it when we're welding. So what's left of our ABS wire. Now it's Bluetooth. I'll probably just splice it in here. That way the connection is inside the vehicle. Keep it a little safer from the elements. So there's a sill plate that goes in front of the back door and up part of the quarter. So we're going to pull that out of the way because it's covering up our wheelhouse. Take all the screws out of it. Some are stuck in the plastic. And it's underneath that cage, so we'll just slide it out from under there. There's a little vent down below. Doesn't really do much, but it's in our way, so we got to take it out. We'll bolt our tie downs back down so I don't lose them. And look at that, I found another inspection port. It was hidden underneath that trim piece. Yeah, to me, not worth patching all that. So we'll scribe where our old wheelhouse was. So when we put our new one up, we just line it up. Should fit pretty much exactly where the old one was, because we're only changing one part. We'll remove the wheel and tire and our custom low profile hubcap. Did I mention I hate lug bolts yet? Because I do. A lot. The pile. Now we'll pull our wheel liner down, or what's left of it. It's held in with the plastic nuts. Pile. And now we can start drilling out our wheelhouse. This little piece in the back goes over the top of our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is actually sandwiched in between, so we're going to have to drill these out. So I have the flat tip drill bit because I want to go through the first 2 layers but not through the third. So we'll just drill all these out of here. And our inspection port cuts are a little rough, so we're going to hammer them flat, because I can't get the die grinder in there to cut the rest of the welds when all that metal is peeled open. And I don't want to catch the metal on my skin and accidentally tear the metal any worse, because I'm not wearing gloves to protect the metal. Now we can take our die grinder, start grinding all our welds out. They did put quite a few welds in this little panel. Not sure why, because it's also held in with glue, structural adhesive, whatever you want to call it. So now we'll separate our welds with our breaker. I could heat it up to break that structural bonding adhesive loose, but this is more fun. There's one weld in the bottom that I had to drill out because the piece is sandwiched in between 2 other pieces. So now we can get the welds on the outside. We'll scrape all of our seam sealer off so we can see our welds. And we'll grind them out of there. I think this is where the tool experts tell me I should be using a belt sander. And we could use a breaker, but a hammer is much more fun. And quicker. So we'll just smash our piece loose, all the welds will tear. And if we ground them out right, it'll only tear the part we're throwing out. So there is some structural bonding adhesive where those pieces are sandwiched together. And I don't want to beat up the pieces that we're saving too bad, so we'll heat this part up. Now it's time to straighten out our floor that was all tore up from the tire. So we'll just hammer it into place. Yeah, the tire really did smash it up that bad. So we'll work it around till it's back where it belongs. Then we'll fit our new piece up there. So we ground all of our welds on the body down and cleaned up our piece so that we can weld. We put our weld through primer on, and now we're going to put our bonding adhesive on. Now the bonding adhesive can't go over the weld through primer. It has to go direct to bare metal. So we didn't prime the pieces that it's sandwiched between. And we also didn't prime the little lip around the edge, which is actually where the bonding adhesive goes. There's no bonding adhesive in the weld area, other than what might get up there when we squeeze it together. So it's okay to put weld through primer in there. Just a little extra corrosion protection. Sometimes you weld through the bonding adhesive, not on this one. So now we're ready to set our piece in there. Slide it between our other two pieces in the back. And drop it down on the other side of the floor. One more part in the front that has to get between two other pieces. We'll guide that in. Once that's in, we're ready to clamp it all up. We'll put our clamps on there. Then we'll have the welding gnome weld it all up. So the welding gnome did his job. So did the painting gnome. He actually put some etching primer on there. So now we're going to seam seal it wherever the factory had our seam sealer. Little finger painting. Look, I'm wearing gloves. Or at least one. So once we get our seam sealer in here and it dries, they can paint the inside of the wheel well. There were a couple holes on that outer wheelhouse, and we just patched. All this gets covered up anyway with the plastic wheel liner, so I'm not too concerned if it looks factory. The clamps on the bottom of the quarter are actually holding the bonding adhesive in. The last couple inches were broken loose, and these quarters aren't welded on, they're just glued on, at least around the wheel opening. So we ground out the old stuff, put some new stuff in there, and clamped it up. So now we need to take our door off. This is the right rear door. First you have to disconnect the handle cable. We'll unbolt the bottom. I'll put one bolt back in it, just finger tight, just to hold it in place while we take the other ones out. So I got the roaming gnome to stop roaming, long enough to hold the door at least. One bolt the back. We'll take our bolt out of the bottom, and we can take our two bolts out of the top. And our door is ready to come off. No wires. There's contacts in the front, so when you close the door, that's when it powers everything up. And the reason we had to take it off is because of this little hole here. Apparently the shrapnel from the wheel went through the wheelhouse and into the quarter and poked this little hole in there. So we're going to hammer it all down. If this were a regular door that hinged forward, I could have just opened the door and fixed all this, but because the door slides, it was constantly in our way, so we had to take it out of the way just to get to this. So I'll hammer it all smooth, grind off all the broken paint. Those bodywork gnomes, just laying around all the time. And weld up our hole. And we'll grind it down and let the bodywork gnome take over. So our bodywork gnome is done, and apparently the painting gnome snuck in. Painted the inside of it for us, so now we can start putting it back together. We'll put this rear sill plate on, just held in with a bunch of screws. Put our little cargo tie downs down. Just one bolt in the center. Install our little caps in the quarter panel. One in the floor. We just had those out of the way so we could paint all that. We'll install our useless little vent in the back to take out the paper from when they painted it. Clips in the bottom, snaps on the top. Bolt in the rear tie down. And one little rubber baby buggy bumper back here. Now we have to get the rest of the residue off from all the lettering that was on it. Just to see how bad they messed it up. They used a razor blade to shoot up the paint in some spots. So I want to get this all off of there and get it clean to see what we need to paint. This door doesn't look too bad. The hood is getting painted. It had a bunch of deep scratches in it. There was a little dent in the front, so we're going to take care of all that and then paint the hood. I'm just wiping it down with wax and grease remover. It softens it up, so you kind of soak it really well and then wipe it off. If there's any thick spots, you can just scrape them off with your fingernail. And when you're all done, just wipe it all down with a clean rag. It'll get most of the residue off of there. You still will have to buff it to shine it up a little bit. Apparently somebody gave Scott a little bit too much caffeine today. He's going pretty quick. So there's some lettering across the bottom. Comes off pretty easy. And this looks like it was one of those "How's my driving" stickers. It does not come off so easy. So we're going to use a plastic razor blade instead of our fingernail. Works a little better. Kind of wish they had left that sticker on there so the tow truck driver could have got some calls about his driving. So we'll just scrape the rest of it off. And that's why we clean it off. There's some pretty good gouges. They went right through the paint down to the bare metal. So we're going to have to paint this door. We're almost done with our door. One last little part. You can see those gouges pretty good in the paint. So we're going to have to sand it down, prime it, and paint this part of the door. One more door. There were decals on the right quarter, but since we were painting the bottom of it, we just cleaned up the top. We ended up painting the whole quarter. There was one little nick in the paint on this door. Touch-up paint's going to take care of that. So now we can remove our nameplates. Since everyone keeps telling me it's a Fiat, I guess I'll get Fiat names. Because I guess this is the first rebadged vehicle that's ever existed, or something. We can pull off our dealer tag. We'll use a magic eraser, get all that out of there. But we need to strip down the rest of the door. So we'll pull this interior panel out, just snaps in. Wiggle and pull. Then there's two nuts on the inside for the finish panel, so you take those loose. Squeeze the little clip out of it and then pull it off. Now we can unbolt the taillights, take them out of the way. On the right side, we're taking the light out because we need to paint the quarter panel, and there's a hidden bolt underneath to take the bumper off. So there's 3 screws on the inside, and then it pops out of the quarter. Fiat gave us just enough wire so we can see the plug, yet still make it rather difficult to actually unplug it. Thanks, guys. So now we're going to do the same thing on the passenger side. Pull it out of its clips. Try not to break it. We also want to be really careful not to spill any of the blinker fluid out of the light, because Fiat blinker fluid is really expensive. It's collected from the tears of joy from people that bought Fiats, so it's pretty rare. And we pull our wheel liner out of the left rear. Just a bunch of Phillips screws that go around the outside edge. I'm too lazy to take the tire off, so we'll do it with a little ratchet. Now we can get to those bolts that were underneath the taillight. There's a few across the bottom. Unbolt those. And the 4 across the top under the sill plate. So 1 more in the quarter. We'd already taken the one out of the other side. Push our wheel liner out of the way. Pull the bumper out of the clips. And we pull the bumper off. There's 1 plug in it for all the parking sensors. It's not really friendly. Just gotta kind of yank it apart. So that's as far as I can go today. I'm waiting on the painting gnome to come in and finish painting the rest of this up, and then we can throw it all back together, get this thing out on the road. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.